Today I'm going to show you how you can get a fat like this one into a delicious spirit like this one in order to make the most delicious, silky textured, smooth, fat washed spirit, which is perfect for sipping. Or also mixing into cocktails or coffee cocktails, which is what we're going to do today. We're going to talk through the basics of fat washing, what it is, how to do it, and how you can use it at home to get the most amazing texture into your drinks. And if you haven't heard of fat washing before, don't worry too much. It's nowhere near as disgusting as it sounds. So let's make some fat washed coffee cocktails. Welcome back to the Coffee Cocktail channel with me, Dan Fellows. If you're new here, welcome along. This is all about coffee and cocktails and kind of bringing the two together to create distinctive, interesting and delicious drinks. So today we're talking about fat washing. And what exactly is fat washing, I hear you ask? Well, I'm pleased you asked. Essentially what we're doing is infusing a fat into a spirit to infuse all the delicious flavors from the fat, either the savory notes or the kind of flavor characteristics, but also removing the fat itself so we don't have any unpleasant kind of horrible strange textures. We get the most amazing silky smooth texture on the palate, which just makes you want more and more of the spirit. So when we've got our fat washed spirit, this is perfect for sipping and also mixing into cocktails and coffee cocktails, which is what we're going to do today. So I'm going to be making a cocktail I'm really excited about. It's delicious and it's got a terrible name. It's the Cacao butter washed coffee old fashioned. And if you can think of a better name, leave it below in the comments. So the magic ratio I work to when it comes to fat washing is 1 part fat to 3 parts spirit. And although some people prefer to change their ratio based on the intensity of flavor of the fat, I like to start strong with 1 to 3 and then just dilute it down after with the raw spirit if it's too intense. But again, when you're mixing, you're going to add other ingredients, so you want that kind of high intensity flavor. So I'm going with 50 grams of cacao butter, which is actually quite easy to get hold of. This just came from Amazon. And the reason I chose this is A, it's delicious, but B, it pairs really well with our whiskey, which I'm adding 150 grams of, which is our Kavalan number 1. So Kavalan number 1 has kind of tropical notes, vanilla and white chocolate flavors. Highly recommended, but you can choose any spirit you like. As well as this, both of these ingredients tie in perfectly with the coffee I'm going to be pairing them with at the end, which comes from my friends at UE. And this again has really complementary flavor notes. So this is a washed Colombian coffee with flavor notes of kind of stone fruit, so apricot and plum, and some chocolate notes in there. And all of these 3 ingredients tie in perfectly together. So when you're fat washing, you can use any fat and spirit of your choice, but it's really important to think about how well they pair together and how well they complement each other. So when it comes to fats that I've used in the past, I've used sesame oil, brown butter, peanut butter, all of which work really well. Some people like to use kind of animal fats like bacon, but we're going to keep things a bit fresher here today. You can also use any spirit that you like, so pick your favorite spirit. So let's get started. First of all, we need to melt our fat into liquid form if it isn't already. So I'm going to pop this in a pan and just, come on. So I'm going to pop this on a very low heat. So now this is fully melted down to a liquid. I'm going to combine it with our whiskey, so 150 grams, and it'll fully mix. It does look a bit weird, but we're going to be getting rid of all the actual fat itself, so don't panic. Just going to give that a good stir to mix in the cacao butter, and already, this is smelling really good. If you've never tried cacao butter, I would recommend trying it. I never had until quite recently, but it's actually quite easy to get hold of. Now we've mixed that together, just going to leave that to one side for around about 12 hours to fully infuse. So over the next 12 hours, or a little bit more is fine, you want to keep mixing this together, giving it a little stir so it fully infuses, and then we're going to pop this in the freezer. And then, once this is fully frozen, we'll be left with something that looks like this. So as you can see here, the fats have completely frozen, whereas the spirit with its high ABV obviously hasn't. And this is exactly why you can't use a lower ABV spirit or a liqueur, because the whole thing would freeze. So we've got our separated fat from our fat washed spirit. We just want to pass this through a paper filter. If it doesn't come through straight away, you can just make a small few holes in the fat, just being a bit careful. Essentially you're kind of breaking the seal. But once you've broken through the fat, it should all pour through nicely. You'll be left with this fat, which has had a lot of the flavor extracted from it, but this can be used for cooking or baking, and it's still very delicious. So this will take a few minutes just to paper filter, and you'll be left with this, which is our cacao butter washed Kavalan #1 whiskey. And this is super delicious to sip, so I'm gonna give it a little taste. Can confirm. Wow, so good. Silky is the word I keep using, but you've got the cacao notes coming through, ties in with the kind of flavors of the whiskey really well. And now we're gonna make a cocktail. So let's make the cacao butter washed coffee old fashioned. All right, so let's make the cacao butter washed coffee old fashioned. I actually think that's the worst name for a cocktail I've ever come up with, but I think it's one of the best drinks I've made for a very long time. So hopefully that balances out. If you can say cacao butter coffee washed cacao butter washed coffee old fashioned 3 times, I'll be very impressed. So the cacao butter washed coffee old fashioned starts with 60 mils of our cacao butter washed whiskey, the Kavalan #1. A good generous pour, which is really important to any old fashioned because we want to get that real nice silky texture and the whiskey base. Next up, because we're taking inspiration from this amazing coffee from Yui, the Colombian washed coffee with those kind of stone fruit and chocolate notes, I want to tie in a really delicious ingredient, which is one of my favorite ingredients in the world, in fact, which is umeshu. So if you've never tried umeshu, I would very much say try umeshu. It's incredible. It's a plum sake based liqueur, and it's got really delicious kind of stone fruit characteristics, a little bit of acidity. It's really well balanced, super delicious. Keep it in your fridge, sip it whenever you want, something super delicious. And because we've got the apricot and plum notes in the coffee, this kind of plum liqueur based on the sake, which is also said to be very healthy by certain people, can't verify that, is just a perfect partner. So 60 mils of the fat washed whiskey, 20 mils of umeshu, then we're gonna go 5 mils of coffee saccharum. So this is essentially made from the coffee from Yui. I've made a load of espresso with it. I'm left over with pucks. I've infused these pucks into dry sugar and made coffee saccharum. So I'll link this at the end of the video, how you can make this, but essentially it brings the kind of characteristics of the coffee in a very high intensity way, also brings some sweetness from the sugar which I've paired with it, which was light muscovado sugar. We've got the base of our old fashioned. Now we need to add some kind of seasonings. And seasoning a cocktail is something that I think is really underrated. So we want to add, first of all, 0.4 grams of saline solution, made at a 1:5 ratio of good quality salt to boiling water. And usually I add more of this, but because it's quite a delicate drink, I want to make sure we don't taste the salt in there. So this is actually half as much saline as I'd usually add, but it works really well. Next up, vanilla extract. And we're going to add 0.2 grams of this. So again, this doesn't bring a vanilla flavor per se. It just really kind of ties everything together. We've got vanilla characteristics in the coffee, we've got vanilla characteristics in the whiskey, and we just want to make sure that it all kind of harmonizes really nicely. And then finally, for bitterness and some kind of citrus notes, we want to add 0.4 grams of bitters, which is orange bitters from my friends Scrappy's in Seattle, home of Slayer Espresso, and also Scrappy's bitters. And 2 to 3 dashes, 0.4 to 0.6 grams is just perfect. And then we want to stir this down with lots of good quality cubed ice. So we only want to stir this for around about 10 to 15 seconds. We want to just kind of chill the drink, but not add too much dilution because we're going to serve it over ice as well. And now that's getting nice and cold. We can strain that into our frozen glass with clear ice. So good quality ice, good quality frozen glassware is really important, and it just really elevates our cocktail. And then the final part of the drink, which is actually really, really important, is just a little peel of lemon, which we're going to express over the drink. And we've got a bit of acidity from the bitters, a little bit of acidity from the umeshu, but this just kind of balances the drink really nicely, brings a really nice aroma of lemon, and just kind of harmonizes everything really nicely. So give that a little squeeze over the drink. And there we have, do I have to say it again? The cacao butter washed coffee old fashioned. Cheers. It's so good. It's all texture, just like white chocolate and vanilla, almost ice creamy. Really silky. I keep saying silky, but it's the only word I can really use to describe it. Got plenty of whiskey flavor, plenty of plum coming through from the umeshu. the coffee's there but subtle, and the sweetness level is really, really nice. But play around with all these different kind of things you've got at your disposal, different fats, different spirits, different coffees, different cocktails, different coffee cocktails, and see what you find. If you want to learn how to make clear ice, click here. If you want to learn how to make coffee saccharum, click here. But most importantly, make sure you subscribe to the channel, which should be here, and I'll see you soon. So thanks very much for watching. Have a good week. Tasty.